What's up, college football fans? Tony Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show. Today, joined by Eric Henry, we're going to discuss UAB's latest hire for the new head coach in Trent Dilfer. And before we get into all that, guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football, G5 football, any or all of the above, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that is truly all that we talk about. Eric, thank you for jumping on with me. And man, just kind of, what are your initial thoughts about this hire? Trent Dilfer.
Yeah, man. First off, always a pleasure hopping on with you. You know, you're my boy, so anytime I can come on here and chop it up with you, talk a little G5 football, always a pleasure. Initial thoughts, I will give a shout out to one of our writers who you're actually going to talk to in a little bit. That is Kevin Fielder. He covers the American for us at Underdog Dynasty, but he is a FAU student and also is the publisher of Owls 247. So I know you're going to talk to him in a little bit about the hire there, Tom Herman. But why I bring up Kevin is he wrote an opinion piece for Underdog Dynasty referring to kind of analogizing the Trent Dilfer hire to that of Jeff Saturday, with the Indianapolis Colts, and saying that, it seems to be kind of the trendy thing now. We've seen it with Deion Sanders, right? Essentially coaches who don't have any prior substantive coaching experience. And here's kind of where I fall on that. And so, I can understand people, we tend to want to follow the trends, right? You don't have a lot of people want to think outside the box. And I can understand most people being a little bit uncomfortable with Trent Dilfer, considering he was not a Deion Sanders, right? And that he was not a high profile player. Now, me being born and raised in Tampa, he was my quarterback as a kid, from 94 to 99. Trent Dilfer was a Buccaneer, first made a Pro Bowl in 1997. Probably most notably known for winning a Super Bowl championship with the Ravens the year after in 2000. And then his tenure with ESPN for, probably at least a decade or so as an analyst, right? But since then, he's been coaching high schools after they had some budget cuts there and has, had a lot of success with that program there in Nashville. But the reason why I don't necessarily have a massive issue with the hire is this. With Trent, you got to think, given his time at ESPN, his time in the NFL, and he also, was heavy in the Elite 11 circuit, even when he was in the NFL, even when he's with ESPN, so you got to think that there's a level of connections that he should have that I think he's going to be able to build a reasonable staff. That's what this hire is going to come down to. I don't want to, get too far down ahead. I'm sure you can have other questions, but in my mind, it's not the hire of Trent Dilfer, right? It's who are going to be his coordinators. I think he said it in his presser. He said that, have I ever recruited? No. But you better believe I'm going to have, hire some people who have done this that I trust, who are experienced and well-versed and well-regarded in doing that. So who are going to be his coordinators, his position coaches? I think those things will carry over. And for better or worse, it's a splashy hire. It's a hire that I can understand the UAB faithful, steady Bill Clark, a hell of a college football coach, right? Someone who, no matter where he was, had a lot of success. You're kind of shifting away from that, a bit of a splashier hire, so to speak. But I think it helps you stand out as you go to the American and kind of build a name for yourself, especially nationally.
Yeah, and I haven't heard the presser. Also, for anybody listening to this, John Duncan and Darian, they do a Blazer Victory podcast. I'll leave the link in the description below. They really went in depth on this hire. They cover UAB exclusively, I feel like. And anyway, so again, they kind of touched on a few of these things, but I haven't keeping up with UAB Twitter. I haven't listened to his presser, his media conference, whatever yet, but everyone's saying he may not be a good coach, but he killed the presser. That's all I'm seeing, via the tweets. So that being said, I mean, he seems to be kind of a savvy guy,
Sure.
people that are drawn to. And the fact that his Elite 11 connections, I'm sure a lot of the guys that he's, coached up at those events, Elite 11 being the 11 top QBs in the nation for anyone.
Yeah, we should clarify for the audience. Sure.
Yeah. Some of those guys in this new world of college football, they're going to be in the portal. And, I'm sure he mentioned, he may not be a marquee recruiter. I'm not trying to downplay recruiting. Is it something simple? Because it's definitely not. But the basics of it is relationship building and, being able to build rapport quickly in a lot of ways and being genuine, which seems like that type of guy. Also, again, haven't heard of the presser. I don't know if you mentioned this or not. I just saw him take a picture with one of his ESPN guys who I think has something to do with NIL. maybe he has like a branding thing, or he's an agent. These kids are having agents, which leads me to think if he's going to be one of those coaches who embraces NIL like a Coach Traylor has. And, I feel like if you're a coach and you come in and you talk not down on the NIL stuff, that's just attractive in today's college football to recruits. So anyway, just I guess a few questions there, and then I'll get you off here. But do you think we'll see him attract some higher name caliber QBs? I'm not talking about 4 stars or 5 stars necessarily, but those upper scale, upper echelon 3-star guys that could go play at, say, maybe an Ole Miss and be kind of in the fray, or they could go to a UAB and kind of be, oh, this is a featured guy in this recruiting class. Do you think we might see some of that with him, with his QB cachet? And you have anything on the NIL thing at all with him?
Sure. Let me start with kind of something you hinted at there in terms of the press conference. Trent Dilfer, and I mean, he's been gone from ESPN, I want to say, since 2017, if memory serves me correct. So it's 5 years. And I know in the sports media landscape, that's an eternity when it comes to your analysts. And I don't know how many of your listeners watch ESPN, right? I mean, I'm a pretty regular watcher of ESPN. Analysts come through and go all the time, right? So the only reason I mention that is because there may be an entire generation of student athletes, or in this case, recruits, who aren't familiar with him from his time at ESPN. With that being said, he's going to win any press conference. Trent Dilfer is a very savvy speaker. You don't work in ESPN, high profile. Again, I guess I should state this for people who may not know, was part of Monday Night Countdown for a long time, was part of, their Sunday coverage, was a major part of their NFL coverage. Again, with the Elite 11, that was a big part as well in the offseason with him working with the high school quarterbacks, kind of similar to, like, if you remember Gruden's QB camp, it was kind of similar to that concept that Trent Dilfer had. So he's very media savvy. Now to transition that into the quarterback answer, listen, Sonora, I don't think there's a reason to think that he might not attract a 4-star. I mean, again, if talking about his resume, you're talking about someone who was a 6th pick in the NFL draft, who was a quarterback for a dozen years. I don't think there's any reason, and has worked with quarterbacks extensively. I don't think there's any reason to believe that he couldn't walk into the home of a 4-star quarterback and say, a 4-star quarterback's home, and say, hey, look, here's my resume. Here's what I've done. I can, and I think even furthering on that, Sonoy, he was not a star quarterback. He was a quarterback who, again, started for, half a dozen years, made a
Out of Fresno State, right?
Out of Fresno State, yeah. Made a Pro Bowl, won a Super Bowl, but was not a star quarterback. And I think when you look, I don't know how you feel about this, look at Dan Orlovsky as an example, right? Someone who was a backup for 13, 14 years, but when you've been in different systems and had to bounce around a bit, as opposed to being the guy for, 15 years in one team, right? That kind of helps you have knowledges of different offenses and make those relationships. So I think Trent Dilfer could walk into any quarterback's home and say, hey, look, you see, like, these 6 offenses that you're watching on Sunday. Yeah, like, I have ties to all of these through my playing career and through this relationship with the coach and so on and so forth. So I wouldn't even limit it to a 3-star. I would think you can walk in and compete, especially with UAB's facilities right now. They are amongst the G5 ranks, definitely amongst the top in that landscape. So I don't see a reason why he couldn't compete. Now, so the NIL, again, I haven't, spoken to Trent Dilfer or anything like that, so I don't want to speak for him, but I'm just going to put it to you like this. You can't be in today's college football landscape and be anti-transfer portal and be anti-NIL. Just how it is. You might not like it, but it is part of the landscape. It's part of the game right now, right? So I'll leave it to the guys at the Blazer Pod, John Duncan and of course, Evan Dudley with AL.com do a great job covering UAB. Probably have a little bit more extensive knowledge of what UAB's NIL situation is. But in terms of him as a coach, you got to embrace it. Like, there's no 2 ways about it right now, especially at the group of 5 level. I will point out to UTSA, for example, one. They've got a solid NIL base that's continuing to grow. I would look at UCF as another school that has multiple NIL bases there, right? That at least, now, of course, UCF's going to the Big 12. But my point is, if you're a group of 5 school and you expect to be able to keep some semblance of your players in today's landscape, you got to have some foundation. I'm not saying that's all right. You got to have money to pay players, right? I know that sounds kind of wrong in the college football landscape. I'm just saying you got to have something there to compete with those big time programs. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, nevertheless, I mean, this is a very interesting hire. I mean, something that's kind of fun to talk about. I mean, it's not a vanilla, hire by any means. So it'll be really interesting to see how this thing plays out for Trent Dilfer and the UAB Blazers. But as always, Eric, thank you so much for jumping on with me. And, take care. I know this is a busy season for you.
Nah, most definitely. Really quick shout outs, quick plugs. Of course, you can find my work on Twitter at Eric C. Henry _ I know Sonoy would probably plug that as well. And last but not least, find our Group of 5 coverage, American CUSA, Sunbelt, FCS, all that good stuff. UnderdogDynasty.com, SB Nation's home for Group of 5 football coverage.
All righty. Take care, Eric.